Time is the greatest and most merciless sculptor of our planet. It grinds entire mountain ranges to dust, evaporates oceans, and makes continents wander across the face of the earth in an endless, slow dance. If we had the ability to rewind the film of history, we would see the familiar, comfortable world fall apart. It gives way to a completely different, alien, yet infinitely mesmerizing reality. And to truly understand where we came from and how life took its boldest step, we'll have to journey into an unimaginably distant past. We're heading back 430 million years. Welcome to an era that geologists will call the Silurian period. For now, forget everything you know about modern geography. Picture present-day Sweden, the island of Gotland. Today, it's a harsh, cool land, washed by the leaden waters of the Baltic Sea. A place where dark pine forests hum in the wind, and in winter, dense white snow covers the rocky shores. But in our time machine, not a trace of these northern landscapes remains. The pines vanish, literally crumbling to dust. The snow melts before it even touches the ground, and the harsh Baltic Sea itself evaporates like morning dew. The very foundation of this landmass, the colossal tectonic plate known to scientists as the paleocontinent Baltica, breaks away from its familiar northern latitudes and begins a long, relentless slide southward. The plate crosses the imaginary lines of the tropics and comes to rest right on Earth's equator. Here, in the very heart of the ancient world, completely different laws apply. There is no winter here, no ice, no piercing cold winds. We find ourselves at the epicenter of a global greenhouse world. Temperatures break all conceivable records, and the climate most resembles a scorching, stifling tropical greenhouse with its glass dome ripped off. Look at this planet from orbital height. At first glance, we see a true water world, an endless blue sphere where land seems only an accidental guest. The polar ice caps we're so accustomed to today simply don't exist in this era. Due to the global warming that gripped Earth at the beginning of the Silurian period, colossal masses of water, previously locked in ancient ice, broke free. The level of the world ocean rose to an incredible height, flooding vast areas of low-lying continents. This is exactly how epicontinental seas formed. Extensive but surprisingly shallow bodies of water spread right over the continental plates. And here, on Baltica, flooded by the merciless equatorial sun, one such sea has spread out. The water in it is so pure and transparent that it seems like molten turquoise glass, blindingly brilliant under the direct rays. It's heated all the way to the bottom, working like a perfect, stable thermostat. This isn't just an ancient ocean. This is a colossal planetary incubator, a warm, gentle cradle in which nature is right now preparing to accomplish its greatest architectural triumph. But before we look beneath this shining surface, let's turn our gaze to the horizon. There, where the shallows meet the remnants of the continent, land rises. And this coastline differs drastically from any modern beach paradise. Before us unfolds a picture of absolute primordial desolation. The continent is a solid, scorching monolith of bare rock. There isn't a single tree here, no shrubs, not even a tiny blade of grass. You won't find familiar soft soil here. After all, soil is the product of long work by plants and microorganisms mixed with broken down rock. But here, On equatorial Baltica of the Silurian period, there's simply no one to break down the rock. This work is performed only by the soulless forces of nature. The wind, encountering no obstacles in the form of forests or hills, accelerates to truly terrifying speeds. It carries clouds of abrasive dust and harsh sand, spending centuries carving bizarre, sharp patterns on the surface of lifeless rocks. The sun mercilessly scorches the dead stones, heating them to temperatures at which any modern life would die within hours. And when the rainy seasons arrive, powerful tropical downpours crash down like walls onto the defenseless land. The water has nowhere to soak in. There's simply no soil. It gathers into turbulent, muddy streams that rush roaring back to the sea. Along the way, they aggressively leach minerals from the exposed rocks and carry this rich suspension straight into the turquoise abyss. On this land reigns absolute, frightening silence. You won't hear birdsong, or the chirping of insects, or the rustle of leaves, or the roar of predators. Only the monotonous, heavy rumble of wind, the dry whisper of rolling sand, and the rhythmic, tireless crash of waves breaking against barren shores. If by some miracle you found yourself here, standing on these scorching rocks, you would be absolutely certain you'd landed on a dead planet somewhere in the remote backwaters of an uninhabited universe. A planet that never managed to give birth to life. But this conclusion would be a profound mistake. The dead land is merely a massive illusion, a colossal geological backdrop hiding the main secret of the Silurian world. Earth isn't dead. It's just not yet ready to accept life into its harsh, stone embrace. All the energy, all the passion and irrepressible force of evolution is now concentrated in a completely different place. To find life, you need to turn away from the barren rocks and look toward where the freshwater rivers flow, carrying dissolved minerals, where warm waves repeatedly wash over the stone shore. The shallow sea of Baltica, shimmering under the tropical sun, conceals within it an incredible story of survival and rebirth. And to fully grasp the scale of what exactly is happening beneath these gentle waves, we'll have to recall a grand tragedy. It played out on the planet several tens of millions of years before our arrival. At the end of the previous Ordovician period, the world faced a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. Sudden, extreme cooling literally locked the planet in ice. Ocean levels plummeted, exposing shelves and depriving marine inhabitants of their familiar shallow water homes. The very chemical composition of the water changed, oxygen levels crashed, oceans became toxic. This was the first of the great mass extinctions in Earth's history. About 85% of all marine species were mercilessly wiped from the face of the planet. Life, which until that moment had flourished and grown more complex, balanced on the brink of complete, absolute annihilation. Ancient oceans turned into colossal mass graves, thickly strewn with empty shells and dead bodies of those who didn't adapt quickly enough to the rapidly changing climate. It might have seemed that the ambitious experiment called life had suffered final collapse. But nature has an incredible, inexhaustible reserve of resilience. Those few lucky ones, those hardy and remarkably stubborn species that did manage to survive the icy hell of the Ordovician extinction, became the seeds for a completely new world. And now, when the heavy ice finally retreated, when the planet warmed again and the oceans, swelling with colossal volumes of meltwater, rushed back onto the continents, these survivors found themselves in a true evolutionary paradise. The Silurian period became an era of great, unprecedented rebirth. Shallow seas, like the one now spread across equatorial Baltica, heated by the sun all the way to the bottom, and abundantly supplied with minerals from the dead land, turned into the perfect nutrient broth. There was no longer deep-sea cold, no shortage of light or food. This was a huge, sun-drenched construction site where life, as if starved for warmth and space, began to boil with unprecedented power. Looking down from above, through the transparent water column, we begin to notice what's categorically invisible from the empty shore. The turquoise surface of the ocean isn't uniform. Beneath it, at a depth of just a few meters, giant, dark, bizarre patches emerge. They stretch continuously for tens and hundreds of kilometers, interweaving into the most complex labyrinths, forming jagged underwater ridges and closed rings. From above, they resemble colossal underwater cities, densely spread across the continental shelf. And this isn't at all a trick of refracted light. These aren't rocks pushed from Earth's depths by blind tectonic forces. Before us are structures of completely different origin. These are the greatest engineering constructions of their time, created not by geological processes, but by the painstaking labor of living beings themselves. We've come right up to an era of unprecedented biological construction boom. Before the onset of the Silurian period, life in the oceans was mostly mobile. It glided along the bottom or drifted in the water column. Yes, there were local attempts to create colonies, but none of them reached such grandiose planetary scales. Now, however, in the warm and calcium supersaturated waters of Baltica, tiny organisms have united their efforts to erect something truly monumental. They ceaselessly extract dissolved minerals directly from seawater, and molecule by molecule, layer by layer, build ultra-strong limestone frameworks. In essence, they're creating new, solid ground right in the middle of the endless ocean. The dark patches we're now observing are gigantic, continuous reef systems. They stretch along the entire equatorial belt of Earth, forming a powerful, continuous barrier that protects the fragile shallows from the fury of the open ocean. They're so enormous and architecturally complex that they could easily be seen from space with the naked eye, if, of course, there had been anyone in orbit at that time to look at them. The stark contrast between two worlds, the dead, scorched land and the boiling, color-shimmering ocean of life, is perhaps the main visual puzzle of the Silurian period. Two completely different dimensions, separated only by a thin, foamy line of surf. The land remains a symbol of the old, merciless world, where only rocks, wind, and water rule supreme. But here, right beneath the waves, right now, the most complex, diverse, and vivid chapter in the history of terrestrial evolution is being written. Every drop of this water is densely filled with microscopic life, phytoplankton that greedily absorbs the sun's energy and serves as a solid foundation for a gigantic food pyramid. Thanks to this abundance, the reefs grow not by days, but by hours, if you think in geological terms. They rapidly rise from the bottom, striving with all their might toward the surface, toward life-saving light, and along the way form the most complex, multi-tiered labyrinths, deep caves, dark grottos, and sheer limestone walls. Think about this. It's these very reefs, these living, pulsating metropolises of the Silurian Sea, that, after hundreds of millions of years, will turn into dry, lifeless stone pillars. Today, on the shores of the modern Swedish island of Gotland, bizarre limestone cliffs rise straight from the water. Locals call them rauks. Thousands of tourists from all over the world come annually to admire these harsh, weathered sculptures whose silhouettes resemble sometimes the faces of petrified trolls, sometimes the stern profiles of ancient warriors. But few travelers realize that these silent gray stones aren't simply an artful play of erosion. These are genuine, fossilized skeletons of those very tropical Silurian reefs. Peculiar tombstones of a distant era when life lavishly celebrated its victory over icy death. Every cubic centimeter of these modern Swedish rocks is 100% composed of billions of shells, carapaces, and skeletons of creatures that once danced in the turquoise waters of equatorial Baltica. This remarkable legacy forces us to view the very concept of time in a completely new way. What today seems to us solid, unshakable ground beneath our feet was once soft, pulsating, living organism. And what we're accustomed to considering eternal mountains are actually only temporary geological forms, painstakingly created by the tireless workers of the ancient ocean. Meanwhile, the wind on the Silurian Baltica coast continues to howl monotonously, hurling harsh handfuls of sand at the barren rocks. The land still keeps its silence, not even suspecting what a grandiose future awaits it. It waits for that turning point when life, having accumulated enough strength and overflowed the ocean's cup, will finally take its most desperate, most risky step. A step from comfortable, warm water straight into the harsh, hostile world of oxygen, gravity, and harsh radiation. But this historic moment hasn't arrived yet. For now, everything most interesting is happening there, below, under the reliable protection of turquoise waves, where direct sunlight penetrates through the water column, refracting and creating on the seafloor a mesmerizing, dancing net of light, where millions of tiny mouths open synchronously toward the warm current, and giant, predatory shadows silently glide between white limestone towers. To understand who exactly designed and built these monumental underwater cities, who hid in their tangled labyrinths, and who mercilessly patrolled their peaks, we need to leave behind the deserted shores and descend underwater. The time has come to cross the boundary between two worlds and plunge into the very heart of the Silurian reef. We'll meet face to face with the true, rightful masters of this ancient, forgotten planet. Ahead of us awaits an incredible world of bizarre forms, extremely brutal struggle for survival, and alien beauty. A world that vanished forever from the face of the earth, but left its eternal stone trace in the very chronicle of our planet. We leave behind the scorching winds of the barren equatorial landmass and slowly descend beneath the water. The roar of the furious surf, which has been pounding the dead rocks for centuries, vanishes instantly. It's replaced by an entirely different sound, the muffled, measured breathing of an ancient ocean. Before us unfolds another dimension, safely hidden from the merciless sun and dust storms. The water here is so crystalline, it seems almost tangible. It's a true, transparent dome covering the greatest wonder of the Silurian world. Direct rays of the equatorial sun easily pierce this depth, penetrating the water in thick, vibrating shafts of light. On the sea floor, they weave into a dancing, shimmering, golden web. and this web gently washes over the contours of early Earth's most grandiose metropolis. Welcome to Gotland. Welcome to the planet's architectural marvel, where life celebrates its first true triumph on an incredible scale. Let's descend a little deeper. Allow your eyes to adjust to the soft blue-green glow, and the scale of what's revealed will most likely leave you speechless. For tens, even hundreds of kilometers in every direction stretches a fantastically complex, multi-tiered underwater landscape. To a modern diver familiar with the Great Barrier Reef, this scenery would seem simultaneously frighteningly alien and strangely familiar. You won't find here the familiar branching coral forests of our tropical seas. The forms that appear before us belong to creatures whose evolutionary path ended long, long ago. They've been wiped from the face of the earth. But they were the first true architects of the shallows, tireless pioneers who learned to erect stone palaces directly from seawater. And you know what's most amazing? The foundation, load-bearing walls, and main bastions of this gigantic underwater city aren't built by corals at all. The role of chief engineers of the Silurian period was taken on by mysterious creatures, stromatoporoids. At first glance, it seems they're simply massive boulders or giant layered growths randomly scattered across the bottom. But don't trust your eyes. This is an optical illusion. Stromatoporoids are living organisms, ancient relatives of sponges, whose building power was unequaled in the planet's history. Look closer. The entire surface of these limestone domes is covered with microscopic, gelatinous flesh. This finest living film works without days off. Day after day, century after century, it greedily extracts dissolved calcium carbonate from the warm water. Depositing the mineral directly beneath itself, stromatoporoids build indestructible bastions, millimeter by millimeter. They're unafraid of the blows of the most ferocious tropical storms. If we were to cut one such dome in half, we'd see a remarkably even, layered structure. It closely resembles annual rings on the cross-section of an ancient tree. Except here, each layer is an entire epoch in the life of the ancient ocean. The surface of these creatures is studded with tiny, star-shaped channels. Through them, millions of invisible organic pumps continuously circulate water, filtering out oxygen and food particles. They work in absolute silence, but the scale of this collective labor is simply colossal. It's their heavy skeletons that serve as that primordial concrete on which rests all the remaining, far more fragile and elegant architecture of the reef. And now, among these massive sponge-built mounds, an entirely different life blossoms. Here, ancient corals come into their own. Their bizarre forms easily shatter our modern stereotypes. Meet the rugose corals, or four-rayed corals, some of the most striking inhabitants of this era. Look at a solitary rugose. It bears no resemblance to those fluffy bushes we usually call corals. Rather, it's a curved, wrinkle-covered horn of some mythical beast, its sharp end driven firmly into the seafloor, or fused to a vertical cliff face. And some of these horns grow to truly frightening sizes, over half a meter in length. But the most interesting part is hidden inside. Deep within the sturdy limestone cup sits the master himself, a giant coral polyp. During the day, when the sun pierces the shallows, it retracts deep into its shell, hiding delicate tissues from predators. But as soon as the sun touches the horizon, the reef transforms beyond recognition. From each such stone horn, extremely slowly, like an alien flower bud opening, emerges a crown of translucent, pulsating tentacles. They begin to sway gracefully, in rhythm with the underwater currents, greedily snatching zooplankton passing by in the night water. However, not all corals here are confirmed loners. In neighboring quarters of the reef, we see a completely different survival strategy. It's demonstrated by the rugose relatives, tabulate corals. These are true geniuses of social architecture. They don't waste time on solitary towers, preferring to erect enormous, densely populated residential complexes. If you look at a tabulate colony from above, it resembles a honeycomb of perfect geometry. Each tiny hexagon in this honeycomb is a separate apartment for a microscopic polyp. But together, they form a single, colossal superorganism. They grow in strict synchrony, layer by layer. The polyps seal off their old, lower floors with horizontal partitions and collectively move higher and higher to where there's more light and nutrient currents. It's precisely this tactic of mass, dense construction that allows tabulates to rapidly capture gigantic areas of the seafloor. They compete on equal terms for a place in the sun, even with the mighty stromatoporoids. And yet, the most mesmerizing spectacle on this ancient shallow water awaits us where the current accelerates, washing over the tops of limestone ridges. Here spread entire forests of beings whose appearance seems copied from the pages of a science fiction novel. These forests bow gracefully and synchronously under the pressure of the water, exactly like fields of tall wheat in a summer breeze. Before us are crinoids, sea lilies. Don't let the elegant name deceive you. Despite their incredible, refined botanical beauty, sea lilies have not the slightest relation to flora. They're purebred animals, direct relatives of modern sea stars and urchins. Evolution transformed them into flawless living mechanisms for extracting energy from moving water. Let's swim up close to one of them. At its very base, it's firmly attached to the reef by a strong but surprisingly flexible stem. It's assembled from hundreds of perfectly fitted limestone discs strung on an elastic, muscular axis. This construction allows the animal to bend in all directions and not break even in the strongest storm. At the top of the elegant stem sits a cup with hidden internal organs, and from it unfolds in all directions a luxurious branching crown, long feathery arms, thickly covered with thousands of sticky microscopic cilia. As soon as the current brings clouds of nutritious debris and plankton, the lily opens its crown to meet the flow. It transforms into a perfect biological net. Food sticks to the cilia, and then, along special grooves, like microscopic conveyor belts, continuously travels straight to the animal's mouth. The density of these living flowers on the Silurian reef is simply incredible. They've captured every ledge, every elevation, creating a multi-level filtering forest. Their stems interweave into thick, pulsating thickets of the most fantastic shades, from pale yellow and soft pink to deep purple and blood red. This spectacle is truly hypnotic. The endless swaying of millions of elegant arms merges into a silent dance where form perfectly serves function. It's important to understand, the reef isn't just an exhibition of evolutionary achievements. It's a single, incredibly complex ecosystem. A giant, eternally hungry organism where every square centimeter is involved in a continuous cycle of absorption and processing of matter. All this colossal architecture rising above the bottom essentially represents one enormous open mouth. Sponges, corals, sea lilies, brachiopods, they all stand in place, their filters spread wide, patiently waiting for the ocean itself to deliver their lunch. In this seemingly static world, a continuous, quiet, but absolutely merciless war for space rages. If you don't manage to grow fast enough, you'll inevitably be buried under the heavy skeletons of more industrious neighbors. Life on the reef literally layers upon death, using the remains of predecessors as solid concrete foundation for new generations. But our picture of static beauty would be incomplete without those who never stand still. Let's lower our gaze below, to where the sheer coral walls meet the bottom. There, in the deep shadows, among crevices and deposits of soft, blindingly white carbonate silt, an entirely different life boils. These are the twilight domains of scavengers, carrion eaters, and tireless patrols of the seafloor. Absolute supremacy here belongs to the most successful creatures of the Paleozoic Era, Trilobites. If corals and sponges are the stationary buildings of our underwater metropolis, then trilobites are its eternally hurrying pedestrians, repair crews, and sanitation workers all in one. Look at this guy, slowly crawling out from under a massive tabulate. This is a calamine, a classic resident of its time. Its body is encased in a sturdy, segmented, chitinous shell. It resembles medieval knight's armor, only refined by nature to an absolute biomechanical ideal. The shell is divided into 3 longitudinal lobes, for which this enormous group received its name. Moving dozens of pairs of tiny legs, the trilobite leaves a characteristic double track on the soft silt. It continuously scans the bottom with long, thin antennae in search of organic particles, dead polyps, or accumulations of bacterial slime. But the most fantastic detail in the trilobite's appearance is its eyes. Right now, on this ancient reef, we're looking into the eyes of creatures that were the first in the planet's history to learn to see the world in crystal clear detail. The eyes of a trilobite, especially such an elegant one as Dalmanites, with its sharp tail spine, consist of hundreds of tiny hexagonal lenses. And these lenses aren't made of soft protein tissue like ours. They're cast from the purest calcite, the very same durable mineral from which the rocks around are composed. The trilobite literally looks at the world through perfectly polished crystals of rock. Its field of view covers almost 360 degrees. Predators simply have no chance of sneaking up unnoticed. They're everywhere here. Hundreds of thousands of trilobites of every conceivable form comb through every inch of the bottom, plowing through the silt like an army of miniature tractors. Some can boast smooth, streamlined shells to quickly burrow into sand. Others bristle with long, intimidating spines so as not to be swallowed whole. And at the slightest danger, a trilobite instantly curls into a tight, impenetrable ball, hiding its soft belly under reliable armor. These ubiquitous cleaners are perfectly adapted to their environment. Without their minute-by-minute work, all this complex reef architecture would very quickly suffocate in its own waste. The close interconnection of all these creatures creates the illusion of an eternal, unshakable balance. The equatorial sun steadily warms the water. Ocean currents deliver food on schedule to the outstretched tentacles of millions of polyps. Forests of sea lilies continue their silent, hypnotic dance. while on the bottom, fussy trilobites maintain the absolute cleanliness of this underwater paradise. At first glance, it seems the world has reached the peak of its magnificence and will exist in this form indefinitely. But this calm is only an illusion. The reef's architecture, its mesmerizing beauty and food abundance. This is a giant beacon shining in the darkness. And it attracts not only those who want to create, but also those who were made to destroy. The colossal biomass concentrated on these few square kilometers of shallows becomes an irresistible temptation. There, beyond the sun-drenched coral gardens, where the turquoise water dissolves into the deep, impenetrable blue of the open ocean, dark shadows are already gathering. The idyll of filter feeders and slow gatherers will last only until those whose evolution took a far more aggressive path enter the arena. The Silurian era isn't just a time of great construction. It's the moment when the arms race in the animal world reaches frightening proportions. And very soon, the fragile piece of this alien metropolis will be torn to shreds. The architects and builders have done their work. Now, the masters and hunters take the stage. The serenity of the Silurian reef possesses a remarkable ability to deceive the observer. When rays of equatorial sunlight pierce through the crystal-clear turquoise water, illuminating multi-tiered coral gardens and snow-white limestone silt, it's easy to believe we've stumbled upon a true Eden. It seems absolute harmony reigns here. Every creature appears to have found its perfect place, and the sole purpose of life boils down to the leisurely consumption of an endless stream of nutrients carried by warm currents. The slow-moving reef builders and the hypnotic dance of sea lilies lull one's vigilance. But in the wild, harmony is always an illusion. Any concentration of life energy, any grandiose structure erected through the efforts of millions of tiny organisms, inevitably attracts those unwilling to spend centuries on creation. This entire idyll of filter feeders is merely a beautiful facade concealing a far more brutal and dynamic side of Silurian life. The reef is not just a nursery and home. It's a gigantic, lavishly set dinner plate stretching for many kilometers. And the richer this underwater metropolis becomes, the more formidable forces awaken beyond its borders, drawn by the scent of abundance. The shift in rhythm occurs silently, but the bottom dwellers read it unerringly. Graceful sea lilies nervously curl their feathery tentacles into tight buds. Coral polyps, just moments ago greedily catching plankton, withdraw lightning fast deep into their sturdy limestone cups. Now the reef bears deathly pale, rigid walls. Bustling trilobites that had been plowing through soft-bottom sediment freeze in place and synchronously curl into tight, impenetrable balls, blending with sea pebbles. The reef plunges into tense, ringing silence. The light falling on white cliffs suddenly dims. A colossal shadow looms over the multicolored underwater city. It glides over the very tops of coral towers with a grace that seems incompatible with such dimensions. Before us stands the absolute ruler of the Silurian Ocean, the apex predator of its era, whose mere presence makes the bottom freeze in terror. This is an orthicone, a giant cephalopod mollusk whose size shatters conventional notions of animal morphology. If modern octopuses and squids prefer to hide their soft bodies in crevices, the orthicone is encased in a monumental, perfectly straight conical shell. In the largest specimens, it reaches several meters in length. In shape, it resembles a colossal underwater spear or living torpedo that silently drifts through the tropical water column, scanning for targets. The orthocone's shell is not merely a solid protective armor, but a true marvel of biomechanics, a sophisticated apparatus that allowed this creature to conquer the three-dimensional space of the ocean. Inside, the long cone is divided into multiple hermetic chambers. The mollusk's body itself occupies only the widest forward section. The remaining compartments, extending far back, appear empty, but through them runs the finest living tube, the siphuncle. Using this tube, the orthocone masterfully changes the ratio of gas and liquid inside its armor, operating precisely on the principle of ballast tanks in a modern submarine. This evolutionary know-how gives the multi-meter giant perfect neutral buoyancy. It doesn't need to expend energy to avoid sinking under the weight of its own shell. It literally hovers in the water like a weightless airship, hanging over coral chasms with frightening motionlessness. But this giant doesn't always remain a static observer. When hunting time arrives, the massive carcass demonstrates terrifying speed. The wide opening of the shell is framed by a crown of powerful, muscular tentacles. And at the center of this pulsating mass lurks the main weapon, a hard, sharp beak. It resembles the beak of an enormous parrot, but forged by nature from ultra-strong chitin and capable of easily piercing through the thickest armor of any bottom dweller. The orthocone hunts calculatingly and unerringly. Its enormous eyes catch the slightest contrasts in the refracted light of shallow waters, methodically scanning the reef surface. And now, the target is found. A large trilobite failed to find shelter and is now desperately trying to burrow into the white carbonate silt. What happens next takes fractions of a second. But on an evolutionary scale, this strike forever changes the rules of survival. The orthocone uses jet propulsion, perfected to the absolute. It forcefully draws water into its spacious mantle cavity, then, sharply contracting muscles, expels a jet under colossal pressure through a narrow directional funnel. The powerful impulse instantly propels the multi-meter body backward. Yes, the apex predator of the Silurian period swims backward, moving toward the blind zone of its shell. But in the moment of attack, this doesn't matter. The strike is delivered with devastating precision. Tentacles, studded with rigid suckers and hooks, shoot out from the shell and wrap the victim's carapace in a death grip. The trilobite thrashes in agony, but the orthocone's grip is iron. Mighty tentacles pull the prey directly to the snapping beak. Underwater, a dull, terrible crunch of breaking shell resounds. This sound is the anthem of a new era. An era where size, speed, and powerful jaws become the main argument in the struggle for life. Fragments of the torn trilobite slowly glide to the bottom, while the gigantic mollusk, lazily working its tentacles, once again fills its chambers with gas and majestically departs into the blue for another helping. However, orthocones are not the only nightmare of these shallows. Their jurisdiction ends in the water column. But down there, at the very bottom, among the labyrinths of rugose corals and in dark grottos beneath the domes of stromatoporoids, entirely different creatures rule. If we're looking for the rightful masters of bottom space, our gaze inevitably stops on Eurypterids. Science calls them sea scorpions. The Silurian period is rightfully considered the golden age of arthropods. While other branches of life are only groping for paths toward anatomical complexity, these guys have already created the perfect template for planetary conquest. Sea scorpions are the pinnacle of ancient engineering. These are creatures outwardly resembling a terrestrial scorpion, but the size of a large dog and sometimes an adult human. Their bodies are packed in segmented, incredibly strong exoskeletons. It works both as reliable knight's armor and as an external framework for attaching powerful, elastic muscles capable of generating colossal force. One of the most striking representatives of this dynasty is Eurypterids. Its flat, streamlined body seems created for gliding through dense algae thickets and narrow coral crevices. Unlike heavy orthocones, Eurypterids is devilishly maneuverable. Its front limbs evolved into terrifying claws densely studded with sharp spines. These are lethal traps ready to snap shut on any target. And the rear pair of legs transformed into wide paddles. With their help, the sea scorpion makes sharp lunges just above the bottom, raising thick clouds of white turbidity behind it, disorienting prey. Eurypterids are brilliant ambush predators. Their enormous compound eyes on the upper part of the flathead provide excellent panoramic vision. Every bristle on the armored body works as an ultra-sensitive radar, reading the slightest water vibrations and chemical traces of blood. A sea scorpion can lie motionless for hours, half buried in silt at the base of the reef and blending with the landscape. But the moment an unwary creature appears nearby, the predator explodes. Spiny claws shoot forward with unimaginable speed, locking the prey in a death grip. Then, powerful chelicerae go to work, methodically tearing flesh. In this food chain, no mercy is provided. The winner is the one with thicker armor and faster reflexes. And it's against this backdrop of absolute, merciless warfare among giant tentacles and spine-studded claws that the heroes of our own story appear. Creatures that, at first glance, seem utterly absurd, pitiful, and doomed to become merely an episode in the chronicle of extinctions. From them, hundreds of millions of years later, will descend amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and ultimately, humans. These are ostracoderms, armored, jawless fish. The first true vertebrates to stake their claim in this hostile world. Looking at an ostracoderm, it's hard to see in it the ancestor of a shark or salmon. In the Silurian Sea, our distant forebears are 100% underdogs. They have no terrible claws, no venom, no jet propulsion. They don't even have what we're accustomed to consider a mandatory attribute of a predator: jaws. The ostracoderm's mouth is a simple opening on the underside of the head, functionally resembling a vacuum cleaner attachment. These early fish lead a semi-underground existence. They can't attack. They're incapable of swimming fast. Their lot is to remain at the very bottom of the food pyramid, performing the role of bottom scavengers. The ostracoderm clumsily crawls along the bottom, pressing tightly to the silt, and continuously sucks in organic debris, dead algae remnants, and microscopic invertebrates. All this liquid muck it filters through primitive gills. Their routine is an exhausting search for scraps falling from the table of apex predators. But how did such a weak and sluggish creature manage to survive where every meter is patrolled by armored monsters? The secret lies in anatomy. Without giving fish offensive weapons, nature equipped them with the most extreme defense system in vertebrate history. The front part of the ostracoderm's body, including the head and gill apparatus, is hermetically encased in a massive monolithic armor of genuine bone. This bony shield is so heavy that it turns the fish into an underwater tank with a broken gun and overheated engine. Behind the cumbersome helmet lies a soft, muscular torso in rigid scales and an underdeveloped tail fin. Ostracoderms haven't yet developed paired pectoral and ventral fins that allow modern fish to maneuver. Therefore, our ancestors swim heavily and extremely reluctantly. The rear half of the body desperately writhes, forcefully pushing the heavy, bony ram forward. The moment the fish stops working its tail, the unbearable weight of the head shield pulls it down, and it crashes nose first into the substrate with a dull thud. Every movement is a struggle against gravity, overcoming one's own physiology and constant fear of gliding shadows. Heavy bone armor is a forced measure. It's evolution's cry of desperation, trying to preserve the fragile spark of vertebrate life among dominant arthropods. The bony helmet has only one task. When a sea scorpion strikes with its claws, or a young orthocone attempts to close its beak on the head, the bone must withstand the pressure. It must provide a chance to break free. Even if a deep dent remains on the armor, the soft brain and gills inside must survive. It's precisely this daily animal fear and the necessity to constantly take hits that became the greatest driver of our evolutionary progress. The arms race on the equatorial reefs of Gotland forced nature to test bone tissue for strength. Bone, which appeared as heavy external armor, will begin to sink inside the body tens of millions of years later. It will transform into an internal skeleton, become a lever for muscle attachment, form mobile jaws, and create that very spine that now holds your head. We owe our sturdy skeleton to those primordial terrors from which little ostracoderms hid under coral ledges. The scene of survival at the boundary of light and shadow unfolds in all its primordial cruelty. A school of ostracoderms, rhythmically swaying their heavy heads, filters detritus at the edge of a sandy clearing by a dense wall of corals. They blindly probe the bottom, entirely absorbed in extracting crumbs of energy. They don't notice how the water around them begins to vibrate. From dense, reddish algae, a massive silhouette silently emerges. It's a large Eurypteris. Its eyes have already focused on the most unwieldy fish that strayed from the group. The sea scorpion moves its legs, positioning itself for a strike, and tenses its powerful paddles to the limit. Like a released spring, the predator lunges forward. A cloud of sand shoots up from the bottom. Claws, studded with teeth, crash down on the ostracoderm with terrible force. A dry, piercing click of chitin striking hard bone rings out. The kinetic energy is so great that the fish is literally thrown aside and flipped over. But the shield performed perfectly. It didn't crack. The deadly spines merely clicked helplessly against the smooth surface of the armor, leaving deep grooves on it. Stunned, but alive, the ostracoderm begins thrashing its cartilaginous tail in panic. Clumsily writhing and raising clouds of saving sand, it wedges itself into a narrow gap between two massive stromatoporoids, into a place where the wide body of the Eurypterus cannot pass. The predator brakes sharply at the entrance, disappointedly snaps its claws, angrily churns the water and slowly dissolves into the shadows of the reef, departing for easier prey. And in the dark depths of the coral cave, heavily pumping water through damaged gills, our progenitor waits out the danger, to emerge again tomorrow into this arena. The reef works like clockwork. Every second here they build, hide, and kill. This aquatic ecosystem has reached the ceiling of its complexity. The food pyramid is built perfectly, from the tiniest bacteria to multi-meter torpedo orthocones. Every niche is packed to capacity. Competition for calories and space is cranked to maximum. Life is trapped within the tight boundaries of an overcrowded, deadly, dangerous paradise. But evolution doesn't tolerate dead ends. The most severe pressure, endless stress from the necessity to escape or pierce someone else's armor, forces the search for workarounds. When living in the center of the metropolis becomes impossible, the most resilient and most frightened outcasts turn their gaze to the outskirts, to where there's absolutely no food and conditions seem unbearable, but where there are no pursuers. And this boundary is very close. We've seen its lifeless emptiness. This is the shore, where waves crash thunderously against scorching rocks, where shallows break into surf foam. An entirely different reality begins. To escape from giant claws, life will have to challenge forces far more terrifying than any bottom predator. It must confront the fury of solar radiation, the suffocation of open air, and gravity without water's support. Tension in the ocean has reached critical mass. Evolution is preparing to make its most insane leap. The water slowly, inexorably recedes, exposing wet rocks and opening the gates to the harshest testing ground on the planet. The Silurian Ocean seems boundless, but even this great water has its limits. Where monolithic limestone towers of corals and sponges press close against the rocks of the ancient continent Baltica, a merciless battle unfolds every day. A battle of planetary scale. To witness it in all its terrifying grandeur, we need to tear our gaze away from the seabed teeming with life. We'll have to look upward, to where forces far removed from our earthly atmosphere are at work. 430 million years ago, the night sky looked completely different. The moon, our eternal cosmic companion, hung much lower above the horizon. It was significantly closer to Earth than today, and its gravitational grip was truly colossal. These invisible threads pulled the vast masses of the world ocean with incredible force, day after day. They created tides of simply catastrophic power. What we perceive today as the unhurried breathing of the sea, gently lapping at beach sand, in the Silurian period worked like a merciless hydraulic press. Obeying this harsh cosmic rhythm, the turquoise surface above the Gotland reef begins to descend, slowly but inexorably. The ocean takes a deep, heavy breath and retreats from the shores. And what just a couple of hours ago was a reliable underwater paradise, sheltered from all adversity, suddenly changes its face. It transforms into one of the harshest and most extreme landscapes in our planet's history, the exposed intertidal zone. This transition between worlds happens at a frightening speed. First, the highest, jagged peaks of massive stromatoporoids emerge from beneath the water. Water hisses as it rolls down their slippery sides, covered with organic slime. The muffled hum of the underwater world, with its eternal clicking of predators' claws and crunching of torn shells, abruptly cuts off. It's replaced by completely different sounds. Now, a deafening roar of breaking waves, the whistle of merciless continental wind, and the dry, anxious rustling of rolling stones stand over the reef. Giant masses of water recede farther into the open sea, exposing hundreds of meters and sometimes entire kilometers of seabed. Luxurious, multi-tiered coral gardens, which just recently shimmered in refracted rays of light, are now mercilessly laid bare. Without the supporting force of water, they look heavy, awkward, and incredibly vulnerable. Graceful crinoids, whose arm tentacles danced so elegantly in the current, instantly droop. They hang limply on flexible stems, tightly curling their feathery crowns into tight bundles, just to preserve even a drop of precious moisture. Reef builders, accustomed to the stable temperature of warm shallows, seal their limestone houses shut. This entire, pulsating, multicolored metropolis falls into a heavy, forced state of suspended animation. But the real drama unfolds not on the peaks of coral towers. It descends into the lowlands, into natural depressions of the reef foundation, and onto rocky terraces. When the main mass of water roars back, it leaves behind a complex network of isolated pools, tidal puddles, and shallow lagoons. For many bottom dwellers, these random ponds seem like the only salvation. But in reality, they become a cruel trap. Direct rays of the equatorial sun crash down on the wet limestone with incinerating fury. On the Silurian land, there are no spreading tree canopies yet, capable of casting saving shade. No soft grass retaining coolness. Around, only bare stone, heating up before your eyes, and the mirror surface of shallow puddles. The temperature in these water traps begins to rapidly climb upward. Water evaporates right before your eyes, turning into thick, almost suffocating steam. It rises above the exposed reef like the heavy breath of a slumbering volcano. Let's look into one of these tidal pools, cut off from the saving ocean by dozens of meters of hot stone. The water here has already heated to the state of hot broth. At the very bottom, a young sea scorpion, a Eurypterid, convulsively tries to bury itself in the remains of wet silt. Just this morning, it was a fast, formidable predator, a full-fledged master of the coral labyrinths, striking terror into sluggish neighbors. But right now, all its vaunted maneuverability and deadly spiked claws are absolutely useless. Its powerful carapace, which in cold water served as perfect armor, under direct sunlight has turned into a real portable oven. The dark brown chitin greedily absorbs heat, slowly boiling the animal alive. The sea scorpion freezes, slowing its heart rate to the maximum. Every unnecessary movement right now is an unaffordable waste of oxygen, whose reserves are melting with each minute. The higher the water temperature, the less life-giving gas it can retain. Simple physics, which right now harshly dictates the conditions of survival. The Eurypterid presses itself tightly to the rocky bottom of the pool, seeks the deepest place, shaded by a protruding stone, and sinks into grim waiting. It has only one option left: endure. Endure and hope that the tide returns before this puddle boils to the bottom. And very nearby, in the shallows of this same puddle, a tragedy of a completely different kind unfolds. A group of small trilobites has been cut off from escape routes. These tireless janitors of the seabed, accustomed to constant, non-stop movement, now rush about in panic. The water recedes so quickly that the edges of the puddle rapidly dry, leaving trilobites in completely dry air. And for them, this is tantamount to a death sentence. The anatomy of a trilobite is perfect for life underwater, but absolutely not adapted to the atmosphere. Their delicate, feathery gills are located on the underside of the body, right at the base of numerous legs. As long as the gills are moist, they excellently extract oxygen. But as soon as they dry out under the hot equatorial wind, the finest membranes stick together permanently, blocking access to breathing. The trilobite literally suffocates, being in an ocean of oxygen, simply because its respiratory apparatus has dried out. Some make desperate attempts to save themselves. They curl up into tight, armored balls, trying to retain drops of water inside their shell, between the legs and abdomen. Thus, they transform into hermetic capsules, walling themselves off from the hostile world with a perfect chitinous shield. Others are slightly luckier. They find themselves next to rotting tangles of storm-cast algae and desperately burrow into this slippery, foul-smelling mass. Decomposing organic matter excellently retains moisture and protects from deadly ultraviolet radiation. Under this improvised canopy, the temperature is several degrees lower, and it's precisely this pitiful advantage that can become the decisive factor between life and death during the long hours of waiting for the tide. But desiccation and heat are only half the trials that the intertidal zone prepares. As water evaporates in the trapped puddles, its chemistry rapidly changes. The water leaves, but the salts and minerals remain in place. Salinity in such traps soars to critical, truly toxic levels. An ordinary marine fish or coral, finding itself in such brine, would die within minutes from osmotic shock. Their cells would simply be torn apart by powerful dehydration. Life on this boundary demands from organisms not just endurance. It demands true biochemical genius. Creatures that regularly fall captive to the ebb tide were forced to develop unique internal filtration mechanisms. Their kidneys and excretory systems work at the absolute limit of possibilities, continuously pumping excess salts out of the organism, all for the sake of preserving the fragile internal balance of fluids. This is colossal, invisible to the eye, energetic work that mercilessly depletes the animal's reserves. And yet, despite this daily hell of temperature fluctuations, suffocation, and toxic salinity, the boundary of two worlds is not a dead zone. On the contrary, it's precisely here, on the most wind-blown, most radiation-exposed rocks, long before the appearance of the first large animals, that the true veterans of survival have firmly established themselves. Look at the rocks slightly above the maximum high tide line, where only rare splashes of breaking waves reach. There you can see something strange. At first glance, it seems that the bare, lifeless stone is simply covered with a slippery, dark green, almost black film. It looks like wet mud or the aftermath of an oil spill from the future. But in reality, this is living flesh. These are cyanobacterial mats, multi-layered films consisting of billions of microscopic organisms. These primordial architects of ecosystems have no bony armor, no sharp claws, no complex gill system. Their only weapon is pure chemistry. They cover themselves with a thick layer of transparent, gelatinous slime. And this slime works like a perfect spacesuit. It's completely impermeable to deadly ultraviolet radiation. It firmly holds water molecules inside the colony and serves as the strongest glue, not allowing even the most powerful storms to wash the bacteria off the smooth stone. When the sun dries the rock to the state of a red-hot frying pan, the cyanobacteria simply put their time on pause. They freeze, falling into the deepest sleep mode, and turn into a crispy, dry crust, more like ash. In this state, they can ignore heat and lack of moisture for weeks. But as soon as a single drop of seawater or fresh rain touches this dry crust, a miracle happens. In a matter of seconds, the slime swells, cells awaken, launch their microscopic chloroplasts, and begin greedily absorbing sunlight, converting it into energy, and actively releasing oxygen. The significance of these modest, inconspicuous, slimy films is hard to overestimate. It's precisely they, gripping dead granite and limestone in a death grip, who right now are performing the most important work on the planet. Slowly, molecule by molecule, they destroy solid rock with their acidic secretions. Dying, they leave behind the finest layer of organic matter. Dust brought by dry wind from the barren continent sticks to this slime. And so, in absolute silence, on the scorching rocks of Gotland, the very first microscopic grains of what millions of years later will be called soil are being created. These bacteria are silent sappers. They slowly and persistently prepare the beachhead for the greatest invasion in Earth's history. But the respite is ending. The cosmic clock works inexorably. The moon continues its dance, and the gravitational pendulum swings back in the opposite direction. Far on the horizon, where the turquoise sea merges with a sky whitened from heat, a dark, ominous stripe appears. It rapidly approaches the shore, and with it returns sound, a low, rumbling hum. From it, the very rocky foundation of the continent begins to vibrate finely. The tide is returning. And it comes not at all in peace. Masses of heavy, cold water, driven by wind and lunar gravity, crash down with full force on the sun-tormented reef. A wave several meters high smashes with deafening thunder into the outer wall of limestone structures. Water explodes in cascades of snow-white foam, throwing thousands of tons of spray high into the air. This first, most furious strike of the tide becomes another cruel trial for those who, just a minute ago, were praying for salvation from the heat. Tidal pools in which exhausted creatures languished are instantly erased from the face of the reef by powerful streams of icy seawater. The environmental temperature drops by dozens of degrees in just a few seconds. Animals experience powerful thermal shock. Our sea scorpion, which for several hours lay absolutely motionless, conserving energy, is now caught by an inexorable whirlpool. It's hurled with incredible force against the hard, sharp edges of corals. It's at this moment that its durable, multi-layered chitinous armor is truly needed. In this natural meat grinder, it's not the most toothy that survives, but the most sturdy. The Eurypterid desperately works its paddle-shaped legs, trying to break free from the chaos of white foam and go deeper, to where turbulence subsides. And following this, the sleeping reef instantly comes alive. As soon as the saving water covered the limestone peaks, millions of tiny polyps simultaneously open their valves. They throw out crowns of tentacles toward the turbulent stream, oversaturated with oxygen and fresh food. Trilobites that survived in wet algae hastily unfold from their armored balls and greedily pass cold water through their dried-out gills. Balance is restored. The ocean has once again taken its rightful possessions. But this cycle will repeat again and again, day after day, year after year, for millennia. The tidal zone is far from simply a geographical boundary between land and sea. This is a giant, merciless, evolutionary proving ground. This is a harsh forge in which nature tests life for strength by the most extreme methods. Just think about who you need to be to survive here, in this hell of constant changes. You can't be just a good swimmer. The water here is too treacherous and often leaves. You can't rely exclusively on gills. Otherwise, you'll inevitably suffocate during the hours of low tide. You must have impenetrable armor to avoid being smashed on the rocks in a storm and not dry out in the midday sun. You must be able to endure incredible fluctuations in salinity and temperature. And most importantly, you must possess muscles and a skeleton powerful enough so that your own body doesn't crush you under the weight of gravity at the moment when the saving support of water suddenly disappears. Those creatures that make their home on coral peaks, far from this harsh school, will never change. They're too comfortably settled in perfect warm waters to challenge the unknown. Their lot is to eternally filter water until the next global climate change erases their species from the face of the earth, turning them into stone fossils of Gotland. But those unfortunate outcasts, those fussy scavengers and small predators whom larger and stronger brethren pushed to the very periphery of life, into this zone of eternal surf, found themselves in a unique position. They underwent the most terrible training of all possible. The habitat itself, literally twisting their arms, forced them to acquire traits completely unnecessary for typical ocean dwellers. They learned to isolate their body from dry air, learned to breathe microscopic portions of oxygen. They acquired strong legs, capable of carrying the weight of a shell across wet sand. Now they stand on the very threshold. There, beyond the foam line, stretches an endless, bare, sun-scorched continental plate. It frightens with its silence and obvious hostility. In it, there's no familiar soft support of currents and no abundance of plankton. But in it is hidden the most important advantage. There are no giant cephalopod orthocones with their deadly tentacles. There are no multi-meter sea scorpions plowing the bottom in search of easy prey. There, on land, lies absolute freedom, and it simply awaits whoever first finds the courage to finally cut the umbilical cord connecting them to the ancient ocean. Centuries of torture in tidal pools have done their work. The evolutionary spring has compressed to the absolute limit, and the world is ready to change forever. All it takes is one timid breath, one confident step on wet stone beyond the tide line, to turn the page of our planet's history. And this step is about to be taken. The foam of heavy surf slowly settles on scorching rocks. The waters of the equatorial ocean, obeying the gravity of the nearby moon, once again retreat, hissing as they expose the scar-riddled shore of the paleocontinent Baltica. We've already spent considerable time in the turquoise depths of the Silurian Sea. We've studied the monumental structures of ancient reefs, observed clashes between armored underwater giants, and marveled at the delicate balance of marine life. But now, it's time to shift our focus. Our gaze turns toward where, until this moment, no living creature larger than a microbe has dared to venture. We look toward land. At first glance, this sun-drenched tropical landscape appears utterly lifeless. And that's not far from the truth. Before us lies a realm of bare granite, basalt, and gray limestone, mercilessly sculpted by dry, whistling winds. Forget the familiar, gentle contours of hills or green grass. There are no shady forests beneath whose canopy moist soil hides. Stretching before us is an endless, hostile wasteland, heated to temperatures capable of evaporating a water droplet in mere seconds. For billions of years, this continental firmament remained sterile. Land was a zone of absolute exclusion, a colossal planetary shield that merely reflected solar radiation and ground its own rocks into caustic, abrasive dust driven by storms. Had any marine creature attempted to crawl onto this shore just a few tens of millions of years earlier, it would have faced swift and inevitable death. And the issue wasn't suffocation or scorching heat. The main killer lurked directly overhead. For a long time, our planet simply lacked a reliable shield against harsh ultraviolet radiation. This invisible, destructive radiation penetrated the thin atmosphere unimpeded. It literally tore apart DNA chains, incinerating living cells and rendering the continental surface uninhabitable for anything more complex than bacteria hidden deep within cracks. Life could only flourish safely beneath the protective, radiation-absorbing water column. But geological time changes the rules of the game. While ancient oceans teemed with life, while trilobites plowed the seafloor and algae reached toward the surface, an invisible yet truly monumental process was occurring. Billions of generations of marine phytoplankton and cyanobacteria, day after day, performed their routine work. They absorbed light and released oxygen into the water. This gas gradually saturated the ocean, then inevitably seeped into the atmosphere. Era after era, its concentration steadily increased. Rising into the cold upper layers of the stratosphere, oxygen molecules encountered that very deadly solar radiation. Under the bombardment of radiation, they broke apart and recombined, forming an entirely new, heavy triatomic gas: ozone. It was precisely at the beginning of the Silurian period, approximately 430 million years ago, that this invisible gaseous dome finally achieved sufficient density. The ozone layer wrapped the planet in a protective shroud, absorbing the full fury of cosmic radiation. Sunlight, reaching the bare rocks of Baltica, forever lost its sterilizing power. It ceased being a killer, transforming into a pure source of heat and energy. The invisible barrier that had kept life imprisoned in the ocean for billions of years collapsed. Land ceased being a radiation hell, and the door to a completely new, unexplored world quietly opened. To spot those who first dared to cross this threshold, we'll need to forget about the scale of giant orthocones and predatory sea scorpions. We need to kneel at the very water's edge, where the surging tide leaves a wet trace on the rocks, and examine the most inconspicuous details. Here, on the narrow boundary between two elements, bare rock no longer appears sterile. In tiny cracks and microscopic depressions where wind-blown sand and salty moisture collect, pale greenish patches emerge. At first they seem like random residue, a thin film of those very bacteria desperately clinging to wet limestone. But if we mentally attach a macro lens and immerse ourselves in this miniature world, an entirely different picture reveals itself. From the moist, primitive substrate, a mixture of pulverized rock and rotting slime, tiny green stalks stretch upward uncertainly but stubbornly. Their height barely reaches a couple of centimeters. They have neither the broad leaves we're accustomed to for catching light, nor powerful branching roots capable of crushing granite. Rather, they resemble thin, translucent threads, forking at the ends. And at the very tips of these fragile branches sway tiny swellings, sporangia. They're filled to the brim with microscopic spores, just waiting for the first strong gust of continental wind. Meet Cooksonia, one of Earth's first true vascular plants. Looking at this thin green stick trembling in the draft, it's incredibly difficult to believe that before us stands the direct ancestor of all the planet's future forests. It's from this absurd, leafless stem that, millions of years later, the colossal tree ferns of the Carboniferous will grow, along with majestic pines, sprawling oaks, and cloud-piercing sequoias. Cooksonia is, in a sense, patient zero of terrestrial flora. The appearance of this plant isn't merely a checkmark on a list of new species. This is a true biomechanical triumph. Until this moment, all plant life inhabited water. Water supported their weight, delivered nutrients directly to cells, and smoothed out temperature fluctuations. But, finding themselves on land, Cooksonia's ancestors confronted a merciless and invisible enemy: gravity. Without the supporting density of the ocean, living tissues simply went limp on rocks under the weight of their own mass. Moreover, to grow upward toward the life-saving sun, the plant somehow needed to pump vital moisture from base to tips, overcoming Earth's gravity. And to solve this seemingly impossible task, Cooksonia acquired one of evolution's greatest engineering marvels: an internal vascular system. Inside its delicate stem run microscopic, rigid tubes resembling miniature plumbing. Obeying the laws of capillary pressure and moisture evaporation from the surface, this system works like a perfect, silent pump. It draws water from moist soil and lifts it those crucial few centimeters. Simultaneously, these rigid internal channels serve the plant as a skeleton, a sturdy framework allowing Cooksonia to stand proudly vertical, defying both wind and gravity. This tiny plant became the first true colonizer. Generation after generation, millimeter by millimeter, Cooksonia began pushing back the boundaries of the dead desert. Dying, the stalks fell onto rocks, mixed with mineral dust, and created the first milligrams of true carbon-rich soil. The beachhead was prepared. And where food appears, inevitably those willing to take advantage of it emerge. Let's return to the surf line. After each storm, waves cast onto the rocks giant tangles of brown and green algae torn from the reef. Under the scorching equatorial sun, this colossal biomass rapidly decays. The viscous organic matter emits a sharp, suffocating chemical smell. For inhabitants of the clean reef, this aroma signals death and decomposition. But for outcasts trapped in harsh tidal pools, this is the smell of absolute food abundance. The smell of opportunity. Where slippery, dark mounds of cast-up algae rot on wet sand, the water begins to ripple, almost imperceptibly. At the very edge, where sea finally yields to land, movement appears. It bears no resemblance to the graceful gliding of marine predators or the bustling scurrying of trilobites on the muddy bottom. This movement is heavy, awkward, saturated with colossal tension. From the retreating foam, overcoming the incredible weight of its own body, a dark, segmented carapace slowly emerges. The creature pauses at the very edge, as if gathering courage before the decisive step. A wave hisses as it rolls back across smooth rocks, leaving the animal absolutely defenseless under direct sunlight. It's no longer in water, it's on land. Before us is one of the first terrestrial animals in planetary history, a creature somewhat resembling an ancient millipede like Pneumodesmus, or perhaps a stocky land scorpion. Its anatomy is extreme adaptation in pure form. Dozens of pairs of short, powerful legs, encased in rigid chitin, convulsively grip the wet sand, trying to find purchase. Just imagine the enormity of what's happening right now on this empty shore. For this creature, emerging from water equals our stepping into open space without a tether. The second the wave retreated, the animal's subjective weight increased several-fold. Gravity, no longer softened by seawater density, mercilessly presses the heavy carapace into the ground. Each step comes at the cost of titanic, exhausting, muscular effort. Legs sink into wet substrate, and the rigid belly leaves behind a deep, uneven furrow, one of Earth's first animal tracks on dry continent. But gravity isn't the only, or even the main challenge. The real problem is air. Gills that served this creature's ancestors unfailingly for hundreds of millions of years are absolutely useless in dry wind. Were it to attempt breathing like a sea scorpion, it would suffocate within minutes, despite the oxygen-saturated atmosphere around it. The thin, moist gill tissues would simply stick together and instantly desiccate. But this pioneer prepared for escape. Evolution, driven by the harsh pressure of the tidal zone, equipped it with a revolutionary mechanism. On the sides of the segmented body, hidden beneath the edges of the heavy carapace, microscopic openings rhythmically open and close, spiracles. These are primitive but incredibly effective airlocks. Through them, dry, hot atmospheric air enters the body into a complex system of moist branching tubes, tracheae, that deliver oxygen directly to every cell. The animal freezes on the sand. The openings on its sides expand. It takes its first full, deep breath of pure atmospheric air. This quiet, unwitnessed moment is a turning point in the planet's chronicle. No longer necessary to cling to the ocean. No longer necessary to hide in drying pools, trembling at the thought of returning hungry giant orthocones. Air, which for billions of years was deadly poison, has now become fuel for an entirely new life. The millipede moves its legs, shaking off remnants of sea foam, and resolutely crawls toward the rotting pile of cast-up algae. There, in the shadow of decomposing organic matter, among timid green Cooksonia stalks, a true feast awaits. Food that requires no life or death battle. Here on land, there are no predators yet, no competitors, no parasites. This endless, frightening, sun-scorched emptiness of the continent Baltica now belongs only to them. The tiny shoots crushing rock, and the awkward arthropods stubbornly dragging their carapaces across wet sand. They are true pioneers who turned nature's laws upside down. In their fragile stems and heavy bodies lies potential that will forever change the face of this world. Now let's tear our gaze from this hope-filled shore and smoothly rise into the air. We leave the millipede crunching through algae and soar high into the scorching Silurian sky. From a bird's eye view, though the first birds won't appear for hundreds of millions of years, a breathtaking panorama unfolds. Below us spreads the flawless turquoise surface of the shallow ocean. Through transparent water emerge dark outlines of colossal reef systems. Billions of polyps, stromatoporoids, and sea lilies continue their silent, eternal dance. They build limestone bastions and churn white sands, blindly believing their underwater paradise will exist forever, unaware that their era is already predetermined. They are the pinnacle of marine evolution for their time, but they're stuck in the past. The true future is writing its first chapter right now there on that narrow strip of sand. That timid step away from sea foam launched a chain reaction that can no longer be stopped. Tens, then hundreds of millions of years will pass. The equatorial sun will continue illuminating Earth just the same, but the world beneath it will change beyond recognition. The geological clock is inexorable. Tectonic plates will continue their endless drift, dragging the paleocontinent Baltica far to the north, straight into a zone of harsh cold and piercing winds. The planet's climate will swing in the opposite direction. The greenhouse effect will dissipate, and enormous masses of water will once again be locked solid in polar ice caps. Global sea level will drop precipitously. The warm, shallow sea that served as an incubator for the most bizarre life forms will retreat, forever exposing the sea floor. The grandiose Silurian reef, the most complex, pulsating ecosystem built over millions of years, will find itself cast onto dry, freezing air. Deprived of life-saving water, polyps will desiccate. Forests of graceful sea lilies will crumble to dust, and trilobites that failed to retreat to saving depths will freeze forever in dense limestone mud, transforming into perfect stone impressions. The reef will die, but its legacy will remain a monumental monument to itself. Billions of tons of calcium carbonate extracted from water will transform into solid, impenetrable rock. Wind, rain, and merciless northern frosts will begin the long, painstaking work of a sculptor. For millennia, they'll chip away soft strata, leaving only the most massive, durable foundations of ancient corals. And so, 430 million years later, we find ourselves here again, in our time, on the territory of modern Sweden, on the harsh, wind-swept island of Gotland. Leaden Baltic Sea waves crash with a muffled roar against the cold shore. And above the surf line, like petrified sentinels, rise the rauks, giant, bizarre limestone pillars. They stand silently beneath gray northern skies, covered with lichens and salt. When tourists walk among these giants, listening to seagull cries, they literally touch frozen history. These rough stones are that very life-teeming tropical reef. These are the skeletons of countless generations of Silurian sea builders, compressed by time into monolith. In every cubic centimeter of these rocks is encoded memory of warm equatorial sun and shadows of underwater monsters. But the main legacy of that distant era lies not in stones at all. It's everywhere around us. That timid green Cooksonia stalk, first to defy gravity, ultimately covered the planet with an endless green ocean of jungles, forests, and meadows. It filled the atmosphere with that very oxygen we breathe every second. And that awkward, many-legged creature that in panic crawled from a puddle toward the unknown paved the way for all land dwellers. Following it, the shore was colonized by ancestors of amphibians, reptiles, birds, and eventually mammals. If not for that desperate escape from the cramped, deadly, dangerous waters of Silurian shallows, land would still remain an empty, wind-howling, stone wasteland. Yes, life originated in the ocean. The ocean was our first cradle. But it was precisely here, on the exposed rocks of ancient Gotland, that life proved it had no intention of remaining in the cradle forever. It took a deep breath, squared its shoulders, and set out to conquer an entire planet. And this journey, begun hundreds of millions of years ago with a tiny, awkward step across wet sand, continues to this day.